Yeah, well, first of all, knowing that your business is not you and that you're in a relationship with it and that you can decide and set the intention of what that looks like.
Okay.
Asking yourself, why did I really go into business? Was it for financial freedom, for more time? That's usually what people say, but that's not usually always true. Usually it's to prove something, to rebel against something.
Everyone, and welcome to No Limits with Kristen Andre. We are here today with Nicole Lewis-Keeber, who is a licensed social worker, mindset coach, a lot around money mindset. So I'm super excited to talk to you today. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we had an opportunity to meet because we're both in a females in finance group that we've met each other through that virtually. So still virtually here since you're not in the same city, but I was really intrigued by your story and talking with you on the phone because you do a lot of work with mindset and how that affects people and kind of the stuff they went through in the past and how it affects us. So how did you get into the work that you do?
Well, as a licensed clinical social worker, I was a therapist for 18 years. And so I have, that background of really understanding, patterns of behavior and how childhood trauma and, what we wouldn't probably always look at being childhood trauma, but we can talk about that.
Yeah.
How our experiences as children inform our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in our adult years, in our relationships, in our careers, our workplace. And what I was noticing more was people, in their own business. And so I went from being a therapist to doing money mindset coaching for small business owners and entrepreneurs. And I really began to see that mindset was not always enough and sometimes was not accessible to people who had some kind of childhood challenge that impacted their self-esteem, their worth, and how they were doing business. So I began to kind of pull back some layers and see there's something deeper here than mindset. And some people are not getting served by the limitations of just a mindset shift.
It's, it's really interesting because we think about childhood trauma and all the thing, and all of us, that's kind of the running joke. I tell my kids that all the time. I'll pay for your therapy when you're older, because I know there's all these things that as children we go through and that as adults we put our kids through that we realize, we're going to be fighting this for a while. But it's always, in my head, it's always been around relationships. That's typically where you hear the therapy discussions and all that. So it's interesting to hear you talk about childhood trauma and things that you went through or people went through as a child and how it affects their business. So that's not as common of an area, I think, that people look at. I don't know that they associate the two as much.
They really don't. And one of the things I had to get used to early on when I had this aha moment was that I'm going to speak to people about this and do workshops about this and they're going to be stunned.
Yep.
And that it doesn't mean they hate me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not paying attention because all the emails come afterwards and people pull me aside afterwards saying, oh my God, I had no idea that, I created a business where my business, because I believe that we're in a relationship with our business, that my business is my father.
Yep. Okay.
And it's just like, whoa, so,
okay.
Yeah. So I learned pretty early out in my own business that because of my childhood trauma, that I was creating a really demanding and demeaning relationship with my business because I was recreating trauma patterns from childhood that I did not realize. So I had this huge aha moment one morning.
Yeah.
And it all came into focus to me about how our relationship patterns and roles can play out in the way that we create our business.
So what types of, and that makes so much sense when you think about it, but it's kind of like you mentioned this aha moment where you're like, wait a minute, never really thought about that. So what types of things in your work with your clients do you typically see affecting businesses? Because, a lot of our listeners are entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. You are. And when we have our own business, I've never really thought about it until you said it. You're in a relationship with your business. I'm like, heck yeah, because that's probably where I spend the bulk of my time, the bulk of my thought, energy, and everything. So what types of patterns do you typically see in this relationship with the business?
Yeah, so usually people who have in their business, they have defaulted their power. They've given their power away to their business in some kind of arena, whether it is, letting their client, not having good boundaries with their clients and letting their clients kind of walk all over them, not having good boundaries with their time where the business is constantly driving them as opposed to them feeling like they're in control and that they're driving the bus.
Okay, I could totally see that because I have a few coaching clients now that I work with that we're working a lot on saying no. Like they just are, okay, I'll do that. And it's I don't know if it's a pleaser or over deliver type of thing, but they're agreeing to things and letting, like you mentioned, their clients just walk all over them. Not that the clients are intending to do that, but they're not setting boundaries. But I'd never really thought about that relating back to not setting boundaries in childhood or in relationships.
Yeah. So let me give you a really quick example. And I always like to just tell my story because my clients like to keep things pretty confidential. So I think story helps. So I had been a therapist for 18 years. I had worked for other people. I had a small private practice, but it was very simple. I didn't have to go out and market myself. I literally just got clients.
Yep.
Very, very simple model. But when I started this business, as a money and mindset coach, and I was noticing how childhood trauma around money was impacting my clients' ability to charge, ability to ask for the right numbers, giving things away. Their inner conflict really about what money means and what having more money could change for their life for the better and for the scary. And one morning I woke up and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I feel so beat up by my business. It was only 2 years into it. And I was reading Big Magic by Lewis-Keeber, who I get to see tomorrow.
Yep.
And I realized that, and there was something in the story, which I don't even remember at this point, that indicated to me that I had handed over my power to my business, that I was listening to like this invisible they, like they're going to be unhappy if I don't work more. They think I should have more clients. And there was no they there. It was me. This was my business. I created it. I set it up to feel really crappy. It was me.
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized, if I did this, then I'm in a relationship with this business and I have created it to disempower myself. So what can I do to change this? And that's how I began to see that my clients were doing pretty much the same thing, where they were handing over their power to their employees, or they couldn't hire an employee because they had to do everything themselves because vulnerability and delegation was something they couldn't handle.
So how do you, and I think that's a huge thing because, when you said that, I'm like, there's so much truth to it. The theys, they think I should do this. And it's really all about us and our relationship with the business. So how do you tackle that? Like first I would assume it's being aware that you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, knowing that your business is not you and that you're in a relationship with it and that you can decide and set the intention of what that looks like.
Okay.
Asking yourself, why did I really go into business? Was it for financial freedom, for more time? That's usually what people say, but that's not usually always true. Usually it's to prove something, to rebel against something. People who have childhood trauma tend to be fantastic entrepreneurs because they're very independent, out-of-box thinkers, and they're driven in a lot of ways.
And a lot of times they have that I'll show you mentality. Like you said, there's something to prove.
Yeah, they do, but they never get there, right? They're always striving, but never arriving because they're trying to prove something that their 7-year-old needed instead of their 37-year-old. And it can be really taxing on a business structure. So you just have to have, first of all, you have to have awareness. You have to kind of poke around a little bit, unfortunately. You have to look backwards in order to move forwards a lot of the time.
Okay.
And start to realize where is that happening in the structure of the business.
Okay. So with that, and I'm sitting here thinking about my own childhood trauma, mom and dad, as you're listening. No, it's, I had a great childhood. I really did. But I feel like we all had these things in childhood that we went through that kind of shape our, not just how we interact with people, but how we interact with money. You mentioned kind of the money mindset. And a lot of my friends and clients that have our own businesses, we did go into business to help people and impact people, but make no bones about it, we also went in it to make money. And I feel like a lot of times that's where people get stuck, the they, what's going to happen if. Because I remember when I first started my financial practice, my managing partner telling me, because I got off to a good start, I was building a very solid business. And I remember him saying, you're going to outgrow a lot of your friends. And I don't know that he was just talking financially. I think he was talking financially and personal growth. And I remember going, no. But, there was always this thing in the back of my head where I was like, ooh, if I do this, I'm going to leave them behind, the inevitable they. So I do feel like there's a lot of truth to that, and that we sometimes, I don't want to say self-sabotage, but we do often is just stop ourselves from moving where we could for fear of,
Yeah.
is it fear of the unknown, or is it just kind of repeating patterns?
Yeah. So when we talk about childhood experiences, a lot of people only look at trauma as big stuff, like violence or catastrophic illness or
Right.
PTSD, those type of things. But the majority of people who have trauma responses or patterns, they have what we call small t trauma, which are those things we go through during our childhood
Yeah.
that it changes how we see ourselves. It changes how we believe what is possible for us. It kind of veers us off the path of maybe who we could have been, with a lot of love and support, and perhaps not some of those challenges. But, challenges bring gifts too.
Right.
So I always say big T trauma explodes and small T trauma erodes. So it erodes how you feel, your confidence, your self-esteem, and it also compels you to do other things. Like, I don't ever want to work for anybody else because that teacher I had in 7th grade that bullied me, I never want to be in that position again. That can embed itself in your business and how you think.
Right.
So that inner critic and that voice becomes that voice of those experiences we had as children where we're like, I'll show you, I'm not going to do this, or I don't feel like I'm worthy. And so that's where that whole inner kiddo to CEO thing comes in, that when you are running a business, you are not running it alone. You're running it with all those experiences, those inner kiddos that you had in those really challenging moments. They're there too. And you need to know them because they're going to impact how you do things. They can either push you forward in a really fantastic way, or they can hold you back in ways that can be very challenging and can erode the financial freedom that you were seeking.
So once you learn about these inner kiddos and kind of the ones you have and the ones that are showing up, can you fix them, I guess? I hate to use the word fix, but can you address it?
Yeah. So what you can learn to do, and this is, they're like this inner board of directors that you have in your head. So you can.
I love that. I always talk about board of directors. I didn't know I had one in my head. This is fantastic.
Yeah, so they absolutely are. All those, like the 7-year-old, that 10-year-old, that 13-year-old, they're all there. And they're all really not okay with the fact that you decided to start this business and do this really fantastic big thing, because for them, they just see it as challenging and scary, and so they pull us back. It's that inner critic voice that says, you can't do this. This is not safe, or you're not smart enough, pretty enough, whatever it is. It's to pull us back. So they're there. And sometimes when you get to know them, it's dismissing them and saying, you don't really belong here. I'm sorry that you thought you had to be, part of my company, but you're just 4, go play. Dismiss. Okay. And sometimes it's, let's give you a job that really works for you. My inner 16-year-old, I call her Sadie, she absolutely hates networking. She will sabotage me in a networking experience every single time. But if I need to get on a stage and claim the word trauma in a talk, as opposed to overwhelm or stress, she's absolutely there, sassy and ready to have that conversation.
Sadie and I would get along just fine. So
so you draw them in, or you put them in their place, and and you're very, very aware of whose voice is there.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dive in a little bit more with Nicole and talk about this money mindset and how we can all attack these little inner not attack the kiddos. That sounds horrible, doesn't it? How we can address the inner kiddos and make sure they're working for us instead of against us. We'll be back in just a minute. Everyone, check out my podcast, No Limits with Kristen Andre, on Tuesday nights at 7:30. We will tackle the things holding you back and the limits you set on yourself and equip you with some strategies to lead more intentional lives. Podcast launches every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. on Facebook.com/Andre Group. That's Facebook.com/ANDREE Group. We'll see you there. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to No Limits with Kristen Andre. We are visiting with Nicole Lewis-Keeber, who is a social worker and money mindset coach. And we were talking before the break about kind of these patterns and the inner kiddos we have that are affecting our business and our lives in general, really, because it all kind of intertwines. But so let's talk about some of the categories of these people, these inner kiddos that are going in there. What types of categories do you see people falling into when it comes to their business and kind of the where their headspace is.
Yeah, so what I began to notice, and I actually started doing some research on this, was how small T trauma was impacting entrepreneurship and small business owners. And there were some categories which stood out more and more for me around how those experiences, that erosion of your inner confidence, I always say your inner worth impacts your outer wealth.
Yeah, I like that.
And how did that start to show up? Well, of course, money, was the first one, because if you're, struggling to really claim your space and show up for yourself and your business, it's going to impact how you charge, how you process information around money, whether you can ask for the sale. It does, whether you feel like you're worthy of that certain amount of money for your product or package.
Do you see that more when people are just starting out, or when they're kind of up-leveled their business? Because I know with my clients, a lot of times I feel like they're undercharging for what they're worth, and it's a big step for them to kind of claim a higher price point, I guess.
I think it's in layers. I've worked with people who had a business at about a year, and people who've been in business for 20 years. And really it's that up-level place, that place of becoming a new version of you that does make this amount of money, or is whatever that identity or role that comes with having that money. I see it at both.
Okay.
I do see it more at the beginning, where you're trying to, you've left corporate because you're fantastic what you do and you want to do it for yourself.
Right.
It is very different to sell someone else's product than to come into your own business and sell yourself. There's a huge disconnect there and a gap that happens. And unfortunately, I see it happen more with the women, in business than I've noticed with men. It's still there. It's usually at those higher dollar signs for the men. Yeah. But it really is there. And it's something that we have to look at early on, because you can't build a business if you can't charge for it. And if you can't charge for your services in a way that's congruent for the vision of your business, not what you think someone said you should or said you shouldn't, or someone says charge what you're worth. I mean, what does that even mean? Like, you just have to, dive down and just really deal with your stuff around your money if you're going to have a successful business.
Yeah. So why do you think it happened? I 100% agree with you on the women thing, with what I've experienced with friends and clients. Why does it happen more with women? What are we thinking or doing, or what's kind of in our heads where we're like, I'm not worth this, or I'm not going to charge what I'm worth? Why do we devalue ourselves more than the guys do?
We're taught that. We're conditioned into a place of second. We're not primary. I think a lot of people forget it. It wasn't that long ago that a woman could not get a credit card without her husband signing for it.
Yeah.
That was in the 80s.
Was it really the 80s? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
How about that? Wow.
Yeah. And so, still, a lot of my friends are still in a position where, they stay at home. I have no problem with that.
Right.
But they defer all the decisions and everything around, money to their husband. So I just don't think that women have been conditioned to value themselves, to know their worth, to have a voice.
All right, girls, we have got to step this up, because this is, that's not good.
It is not good. And so for me, one of the reasons why I bang this drum of childhood trauma impacts how you do business is because, not only do women have a higher percentage of having some kind of traumatic event in their life, but I really want, any, woman who is out there who has been brave enough and courageous enough to start her own business. I don't want trauma or childhood challenges to be the thing that takes her out. It's not the strategy. It's not, that. It is that emotional sustainability, because the more financial freedom we have, the more say we have, the more power we have, we can change things. And so for me, this is a huge, bigger why than just doing some coaching,
Right. But that's so huge. And I love how you call it small T trauma, because I think when I first talked to you and I heard you use the word childhood trauma, I was like, okay, I didn't lose a parent at an early age. I, fortunately, was it, raped, or my house didn't catch fire, all these big things we think about. But when you talk about small T trauma, which can be anything from continually being put down or our opinions not being respected, the little T trauma things are probably what's more cumulative and is really affecting a lot of this stuff. So I love the fact that you bring that up, because usually when I first heard the word childhood trauma, I was like, yeah, I don't think that's not really me. But as you kind of get into it and you're like, always living up to expectations or what have you, most of us had that.
Yeah, and I mean, I say no one got out. No one got
Right?
out unscathed,
Yep.
and it's okay. It's not, being part of the blame mommy daddy club. That's not how it is.
Sure.
It's just, it's
Yep.
what those experiences are and how they impact us, because our biology, our brain is going to react to it in ways that are outside of our understanding. It's just how trauma patterns happen.
Yeah.
And so whether you got bullied or you were always the kid on the block who had had to buy school lunch instead of having the whatever
The
in
cool
your
Star Wars
lunchbox every day.
lunchbox. Yeah. Yeah.
Any of those things. Like, I had a learning disability in school, and so for me, I went to school every day not understanding what was going on, and they didn't know how to teach me. So for me, that was a
Yeah.
huge multi-trauma growing up. So it's all of those things, and I really want people to normalize it a little bit so that they can relate to it differently and understand and recognize those patterns and how we're acting those patterns out in our relationships, in our career, at our workplace, in our business. It's all there. It's supposed to be there. And we just need to start to pay attention to it so we can disrupt those patterns and
And you
actually
said
have the things that we want.
yeah, and when you said the word normalize it, part of that is understanding that all of us have this to some
Yes.
extent. It just looks different for each of us. So you'd mentioned kind of, the first category. What are some of the other categories you're seeing that are really common?
So, yeah. So that childhood trauma, those things, they definitely show up in that money piece of it.
Yeah.
Another place that I saw it showing up a lot was around visibility.
Okay.
If someone's made fun of you or put you down, or you've really struggled to feel good in your body in some kind of way, having your own business really requires a lot of visibility. You need to go on podcasts, you need to stand on stages, you need to sell yourself, you need to have conversations, and the bigger and more that you have in your business, each level brings more visibility. And with that can bring a huge feeling of insecurity and not feeling safe.
Yeah.
Being visible can be very, very unsafe for people who've had trauma. It can bring up a lot for them. And so they pull back. They don't have the conversations. They don't sell themselves because they don't feel safe to do so. And they haven't recognized that yet.
So how can people address that? Because I do see that as a challenge, myself, other people, a lot of people really. How do people dive in and really attack that?
So I always help people, first of all, I tell people, like, if this is something you've never thought of, never dealt with, you probably need to go see a therapist to kind of help you start to, pull back some of these layers and kind of see where this came from. But you and I here today, talking, we can literally just ask ourselves and say, who is this in here that doesn't feel safe, and why? Why don't I feel comfortable in that networking meeting? Why don't I feel safe, walking in here in this big, arena? And start to ask yourself that self-coaching, that self-inquiry of what's going on, noticing it, honoring it, not trying to shut it up. One of the things I see people do most that is a problem is that they have that thought and they see it as a critical thought. And so they shut it down, kill it, cram it, whatever.
Stuff
people
it back
slay
in.
it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. The inner critic, people are slay it, kill it. Really, actually, it has a message for you. So you need to calm down, pause, and just say, what do you need? Like, who is this and what do you need? And they will tell you. And I know it sounds so weird to say that, but you will tell yourself what's going on and what you need. But we never pause long enough to do that. We're constantly trying to shut down that inner voice that feels uncomfortable.
I like that a lot, though, because the inner critic, we all have that, and we all, you're talking about visibility. I hate, and Isaac, our producer, knows this. I hate being on camera. I can get up on a stage in front of thousands and thousands of people, not bad, and I love it. Hate being on camera. So anything like even the live stream, those of you guys watching live stream, you can see me squirming in my chair. But it's not content. But so you're right. Is this something? But I've never really stopped to ask myself why. So that's an interesting thought, just to figure out where that's coming from. I still do it. I do the show every week, and I'm on camera a good bit, and it just, you kind of go through it, but I've never really paused to figure out why. And when you do thousands and thousands of dollars of therapy, I have never asked myself that question. So Nicole, thank you. We got to work through this.
You're welcome.
But
when you ask yourself why, then you can say, well, what do I need here to feel more comfortable? So I'm not white knuckling this whole thing.
Right. So it's it's a lot of us just tend to push through. Like, I don't enjoy the camera, but I love doing the podcast, love doing all that. So you just kind of do it. But it's probably something really trivial that there is something I need out of it that I'm not getting. I don't know. It's interesting to kind of think through that. So, What else are you seeing with your clients? Because a lot of these, I'm sure, they're definitely resonating with me. So I'm sure they are with a lot of the listeners. What else are you seeing?
Mm-hmm. And I just want to note that, I'm seeing this in the small business and entrepreneurial world, but you could pick this up and put it down in your business, your career, your workplace, and say, wow, it's hard for me to come in and ask for a salary that, I think I don't, like you can do this here too. Like, how am I showing up?
Yep.
So another category that came up a lot was around basically boundaries, but really kind of depending on people. So the people that I've worked with, those experiences they had in their childhood have really driven them to be self-sufficient, right? Okay. This is the skill set. This is the golden nuggets around those experiences. They're driven. They think out of the box. And they've built really successful businesses on their back alone.
Yep.
And when they're ready to leverage or up level it because they can't do it anymore, and usually they've exhausted themselves, they have to get help.
Yep.
And getting help does not feel safe. Again, that vulnerability around needing someone to help you with it. So what they do is they hire people and then still don't give them jobs and still do their jobs. Or they hire people and they delegate small tasks to them, but they really never find themselves in the space of being able to rely on the people that they're hiring because they don't trust. So trust is a huge one. That self-trust, trusting of others, trusting that client who just said yes to you, really wants to work with you and really means it. Trusting, so much, so much about trust. Because relying on someone is the behavior of trust. And if you have trust issues, that ability to rely and relax a little bit and have that support is very, very difficult. This is one of the categories that I think my clients struggle with the most and that we work the most on is building that self-trust and the trust of those around them. Because it can go the other way too, where they trust too soon and too quickly because they've been trained not to have boundaries,
Right.
That can implode your business really quickly.
Well, yeah, and we talk about, trust is a big thing in relationships, but that's why I love so much that you're talking about the business as a relationship. Because we're taught that when it comes to other people, but how it translates into the working world, I think, is a little bit, it's foreign to us, to a lot of us.
Yeah. We just default. This is what happens when we don't set an intention and create the relationship. And this is what it's all about. When we don't set an intention and create the relationship that we've decided to be in, whether it's our career, our business, our family, our partner, whatever that may be, we default into old patterns of behavior, and we are unintentional and mindless.
Yeah, so we always fall back, and I love the word intentionality is my big word for this year. So I love that you're talking about that. So we're going to take another pause, and when we come back, we're going to wrap time up with Nicole and figure out how we can get a little bit more intentional with all these areas of our mindset and our business. We'll be back in just a minute. Hey everyone, it's Kristen. Be sure and visit my website at www.andregroup.com. That's www.andreegroup.com. And while you're there, be sure to download my white paper, Top 10 Reasons Your Business Isn't Growing Fast Enough. Now get out there and create your no limits moment. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to No Limits with Kristen Andre. We are wrapping up our time with Nicole Lewis-Keeber, who has, I'm really enjoying this because enjoying it in a way that I'm like, man, I really got to start diving deep and thinking about some things because, the mindset and how it affects our business and how we're showing up. And like we were talking about before the break, being intentional with our thoughts and how we're progressing, it's huge. So Now you've obviously done a lot of work over the years, both with your clients and research and everything, but you've got some cool training coming up that you're doing this month, Miss Nicole. So tell our fun listeners who you get to go hang out with this month.
Yeah, I'm excited to say that I am going to be spending 3 days with the amazing and talented and also a social worker,
very cool.
Brene Brown. And I will be a certified Dare to Lead facilitator after the time that I spend with her in my cohort in Texas.
I think that's so cool because she's amazing, first of all, and I love her stuff, and it goes so well with the stuff that you're talking about, and kind of being intentional in the mindset and kind of how we are showing up, and I don't want to say the lies we tell ourselves, but kind of maybe how this small T trauma is showing up and how it's affecting us. So that's going to be, I mean, you're already awesome and doing all this really cool work. So I can't even imagine how much more info you're going to have, which is fantastic. So congratulations on getting into
Thank
that.
you.
I think
I'm
that's
excited.
Very cool. All right. So with this, everything we're talking about, the categories, things are falling in. What can everybody listening, what can we do? Like, how do we, I mentioned not like being on camera, and there's a deeper why to it, and asking ourselves kind of what's behind this. So where do we start? What do we need to do with all these small T traumas that are affecting us?
So I think, first of all, like, again, it's awareness and allowing. A lot of times we have been taught not to allow those thoughts and to shut them down,
right?
To see them as weakness. Like Renee talks a lot about shame and vulnerability and how perceived weakness is not helpful, and that we need to be more courageous and vulnerable and heart-centered. And that's not easy to do if we don't know ourselves a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so, what that inner dialogue, like we have this whole like narrative going on in our brain all the time about every little thing. But we all know what it feels like to have an experience where we feel a little bit more charge around it. We feel a little bit more triggered by it. And then what happens is we have this trigger, we have a thought, feeling, emotion, and then we do a behavior. So if we could slow that down and pause for a moment,
okay,
and just kind of say, just ask yourself, what am I feeling? What just happened? Is this actually even real? Because a lot of times it's perception and not reality. And then
Very
ask
true.
yourself, what, and again, this is not my wording, this is Renee's, what is the story I'm telling myself about this? Because a lot of times our brains are geared towards story to understand those triggers, right? It needs to put story around it. And so a lot of the times those stories are not even real. They're perceived or they're created by us. And so when we can pause and think about, what story am I telling myself about this email I just got that they didn't say thanks,
Right,
or,
exactly.
This person that didn't say hello to me that usually is very kind to me when I walk into a meeting, that can spiral someone out for the rest of the day because of those experiences. So if we can just pause, set the intention that I'm going to ask myself, what story am I telling myself about this? And is this even real? It gives you that moment to kind of calm down and choose a new path.
So when we ask ourselves, what's the story? So a lot of times we assume so much about other people and their interactions with us. Maybe somebody's having a bad day and that's why they didn't say hello in the elevator. It's nothing we've done, but we've convinced ourselves that we did something wrong. So, after we pause and ask the story that, what is the story we're telling ourselves? What's the next step? What do we do then?
I always say, when in doubt, check it out.
Okay.
Check it out with yourself. Or is there any other evidence around you at this moment that would point to what the story you're telling yourself is true?
Oh, that's a good question, because usually, nope, there's not. We're just being crazy.
No. The fact that that person hasn't responded to my proposal yet doesn't mean that they hate me and that I'm stupid because I did do well in school. And so they've, caught on the fact that I don't do things as well as other people, blah, blah, blah. Any of all that.
And we can really start spiral. I mean, there's sometimes my youngest has this, and it's, so you see it in kids, and I don't, I'd love to know how to stop it with her. She can just go really quick. I mean, go from like a bad grade to, I have failed out of school for the rest of my life. And it can spiral. And I know if kids are doing this, adults are doing the same thing, probably at a higher stakes.
Those are deeply ingrained pathways that we have in our brain, and we have to build new neural pathways by practicing a new way of doing things. That's why we call it pattern disruption. And that's what that is when you say, what the story I'm telling myself. Because if I tell myself they hate me and they don't want to hire me because I had a learning disability in school, that's not true.
Yeah.
If I can articulate that to myself, then I can calm it down, and I can send a follow-up email and say, hey, I haven't heard from you. Did you get the email? Do you have any questions?
Right.
So it's like a when in doubt, check it out, as opposed to just walking away and feeling like a loser.
Yeah. So asking yourself what story you're telling yourself, and then kind of looking for evidence behind it, or lack thereof. A lot of times.
And usually it's lack thereof. Yes.
Yeah. We're just not finding things to support. So asking yourselves, being more intentional, what's, as we're wrapping up our time, because this is we could literally sit here and talk about this for days. Like, I'm so intrigued. I'm like, I'm going to start doing some deeper thought, because so many of us are dealing with this. And until, I had an opportunity to meet you, I didn't realize how big of an issue this was in business. We hear about it in life, so we hear about it in relationships. And, as a business strategist, I help people grow their businesses, but you do see these patterns come up over and over and over again where, part of, as a strategist, I'm looking like, just execute, but there's these things that are holding them back. So it's not always that easy. So, asking yourself the story you're telling, what can we challenge our listeners to do as they go about their day, especially for our entrepreneurs or even for people that are working in corporate? What's one thing we can tell them to do each and every day that kind of keeps all this in check?
So a lot of times we're trying to solve the wrong problem, particularly as entrepreneurs. We put more business solutions on emotional issues. That's why I call it emotional sustainability. Okay. So if something that you're doing is not working, like putting time management on you is not helping your procrastination, there could be something else. So you might want to pay attention to that. Yeah. But I think the challenge really is that take a breath. Take a breath. Do not send that email until you have gone through that. What am I telling myself here is the story? What is the story I'm telling myself? And is this really true? Take a breath. Give yourself the moment to not respond or react. We are taught to respond and react. We are not taught rupture and repair as human beings. We're only taught rupture and response. So take a breath. Ask yourself those few questions. Is this real? Is this mine? What story am I telling about myself? Before you move forward. Just do that. Just do that one thing. And I think it'll change a lot.
I think it will. And it's causing us to slow down a little bit to be able to do that, to take that breath. I love it.
To set the intention as opposed to react.
I love it. Love it. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being here. This was a fantastic topic. We'll post all your contact information on the post with the show and in the show notes so you guys can get a hold of Nicole, because I'm telling you what, this is a big thing. And I'm so happy that you are talking about this, because this will have a huge impact on entrepreneurs and professionals alike as they continue to grow their business the right way. So thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And then you guys listening, until next week, keep pushing past those limits.